Number 10. Cable. Cable might be suffering from the techno-organic virus, but even then he is so powerful that he can manage to actually stave it off and slow it down dramatically, continuing to live on as he travels through time without, succumbing fully to the techno-organic virus. Oh yeah, did I mention he can also travel through time and teleport, and that he's an immensely powerful telekinetic and telepath? Because he is all of that and more. Cable is also a master strategist and fighter, having years of experience throughout time doing battle. Cable joined the X-Men back in the 1999 Astonishing X-Men series, and aside from that has also been a major player when it comes to other important X-Men teams such as Exterminators and X-Force. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please go and check out our newest channel and give it a sub, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Number 9. Magneto. Usually when people think of X-Men team members, they don't really think of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants leader and one of the most iconic X-Men villains ever, Magneto. But the reality is, Magneto isn't all bad all the time. And over the years, we've actually seen him redeemed quite a bit, becoming more than just a powerhouse of a villain, becoming also a powerhouse of an anti-hero, and in some cases, just a full-fledged hero. Magneto first joined up with the X-Men in the second Secret Wars crossover event, Secret Wars 2 from 1985, which followed the original Secret Wars event from 1984 and told the story of what happened afterwards when the Beyonder, instead of kidnapping superpowered individuals, decided to visit them on their home planet of Earth. Number 8. Kid Omega. I don't think many will debate Kid Omega being on this list. He might be gone for now in the comics, with his trope initially also being to constantly be killed during the early days of the current modern X-Men books, but don't let that fool you. Quentin Quire is still a psionic badass who deserves your respect. He is considered to be one of a limited few mutants who belong to the Omega level class, meaning that he has unlimited potential in terms of what he can accomplish. And while being super powerful psionically, he's also super brilliant as well, and can actually think faster and at a higher capacity than even other extremely powerful and skilled Omega level telepaths. Quentin joined up with Logan's X-Men and was shown to be a potential future Phoenix in Wolverine and the X-Men issue number 42.
Number 7. Laura Kinney. I know, she isn't really new as a character, but Laura Kinney, or X-23, has become the all-new Wolverine, and that is relatively new. She officially joined the X-Men as this Wolverine at the Hellfire Gala in 2021. There are a few characters with powers similar to Wolverine, and there are even a few who are clones of Laura herself. But of all these characters, Laura is certainly the best and definitely the most fan-loved. Her powers are very similar to Logan's, with her primary mutant power being an accelerated healing factor. And obviously she also has retractable bone claws, only she has 2 in her forearms and 1 in her foot. Well, each foot. She was obviously a clone and grew up being made to be a weapon, so of course she has an extremely haunted past. But with Logan as a father figure in her life, she grew up under him, and she even did the same for Gabrielle Kinney, another clone who Laura considers to be her younger sister. She's already done so much, but I just kinda can't wait to see what else she does as Wolverine.
Number 6. Phoenix Force. The Phoenix Force is a weird one to think of as a member of the X-Men. More a cosmic entity than a physical flesh and blood person, the Phoenix Force does have a weirdly strong connection to the superhero community, initially being intrinsically tied to mutants and the X-Men, especially X-Men member Jean Grey. When you think about it, during the time when Jean is often known for being the Phoenix in the comics, this wasn't even really Jean on the team, but the Phoenix Force in Jean's place. While Jean was resting below in Jamaica Bay, Phoenix adopted her form and persona, joining the X-Men team in her place before turning into a villain of the team, becoming the Dark Phoenix, and seemingly, but of course not truly, perishing. If you consider this, Phoenix actually joined the X-Men team under the guise of Jean back in issue 101 of X-Men. Number 5. Juggernaut. Juggernaut is a non-mutant and former X-Men villain, at least currently in the comics, but that hasn't stopped him from joining the team. Juggernaut is also amazingly strong, being imbued with the power from the Gem of Cyttorak, which he acts as an avatar and servant for, serving Cyttorak's will. Cyttorak, however, no longer holds any power over Juggernaut. Recently, Juggy basically left Cyttorak's service to strike out on his own, but still was able to keep his power through remnants of Cyttorak's presence. Using materials Cyttorak left on Earth, Juggernaut was able to construct a new armor for himself and harness Cyttorak's power through this, without being beholden to the demon god and his whims. Number 4. Storm. Definitely someone who deserves your acknowledgement and respect, both as an X-Man and as a ruler, goddess, queen, and regent of planet Arakko. Storm is actually one of the few people who survived the decimation of of Planet Arako's populace, which happened recently. She was at the Quiet Council at the time, of course, of Uranus' attack, but I don't think this was a writing ploy to avoid her being killed, because, you know, some people are probably like, well, if she was there, she'd have to die and that would be really bad. If anything, I actually think this was actually a writing ploy to avoid Uranus getting maimed and possibly killed by Storm, because that's how confident I am in Storm's abilities and power. Storm is a master of all the elements and initially joined the X-Men in Giant Size X-Men issue number 1 in 1975. She wouldn't just be a valuable member to the team though, but would also go on to be a strong leader, taking over for Cyclops as team leader in the comics as early as 1980 in Uncanny X-Men issue number 139. After his mourning of the loss of his love and teammate Jean Grey.
Coming in at number 3, it's Tempest. Eva Bell first was seen in All New X-Men number 1 in 2012 when we also saw her mutant powers manifest. She was out with friends and a boy when her brother showed up and began to get into a fight with that boy. The stress and duress of the situation caused her powers to pop off, and she completely froze everyone within a city block of her in time for 20 hours until the X-Men showed up, helped her, and then took her in. She's been referred to as near Omega level with her ability of chronokinesis within a time bubble, meaning she can freeze and slow down time and is one of the best at it in the world. She can also speed up time in the bubble by decades if she chooses to, which is why she is a member of the Five to age up whoever is being resurrected. And she can even time travel. Although she has shown to lose control over this power from time to time, there is no doubt she is and can become more incredibly powerful.
Number 2, Hope Summers. I mean, what can I say about Hope that you don't already know? Hope Summers is definitely one of the most powerful mutants around in the comics. Don't think many people will dispute that. And the X-Men were fortunate for a time to actually have her on their roster, and just to have her around and as an ally, because she's super useful and super powerful. Hope's powers allow her to take at peak mastery the powers of any mutant that is within her vicinity. She is only limited really by range when it comes to this in terms of her ability to adopt one's powers, and she can adopt multiple powers at once as well. She doesn't drain the powers of her target and is instantly able to master any ability she takes on. It is pretty wild. She's also literally Mutant Jesus, being the baby everyone fought over in X-Men Second Coming. Hope isn't a Summers by birth, but was the adopted daughter of the son of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor and adopted son of Jean Grey, Cable, aka Nathan Summers. Number 1, X-Man. Nate Grey just has to be one of the most powerful mutants out there, and likely the most powerful mutant to have ever existed in the comics. He is the perfect offspring, perfect genetically anyways, of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, hailing from the Age of Apocalypse reality where he was genetically engineered by his world Sinister. Nate would later grow up to be raised not by his genetic parents, but by AOA Forge, who is basically his adoptive father. Nate has fought on the side of his own reality's X-Men before, helping them out, but being capable of traveling to other dimensions and realities and manipulate time as well, Nate has also fought alongside the X-Men of Earth 616, even joining the team in 1999 in Astonishing X-Men issue number 1. Number 10, Darwin. Darwin is one of the newest characters on this list, first appearing as retconned X-Men member in 2005's X-Men Deadly Genesis. He is Armando Munoz, who was sent to the island of Krakoa to rescue the original X-Men team alongside Vulcan, who was on our part 1 for this list, fun fact. Following the ultimate failure of that mission, Darwin was launched into space alongside Vulcan, and during M-Day ended up absorbing the energy expelled from mutants when they all lost their powers, boosting his own adaptive, evolutionary-based mutant powers. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please go check out our newest channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Who knows, maybe at some point I'll be on that channel for a second. You'll have to go subscribe to find out. Number 9, Kid Gladiator. Kid Gladiator is the son of Gladiator, aka Kalark, former Magister of the Shi'ar Empire. In fact, during his time with the X-Men, his father was the Magister, the ruler of the entire Shi'ar Empire. Like his father before him, he is extremely powerful, and confidence and belief in himself has also been tied to his power levels, boosting him when he is at his most confident. Number 8, Rogue. Rogue is one of my all-time favorite X-Men, being one of the members I most gravitated towards as a kid when watching the 90s X-Men animated series. Well, Rogue and Jubilee, I would say, are my top faves from that series. Her powers are super cool, and over the years, as she's come into her own and learned more about herself, have also only become cooler over time. Rogue can, in essence, absorb the power and life force energy of those she touches, as well as their memories. Unfortunately for Rogue, this meant that for most of her life, she felt very alone, unable to touch anyone since basically puberty without fear of, hurting them, leaving them comatose, or worst of all, killing them. However, in recent years, Rogue has learned how to better master and control her powers, able to harness the powers of her fellow mutants without harming them, as we saw her do with a kiss on Jean's cheek during the current X-Men series during a cosmic casino heist. And she can also touch people without harming them at all, as we've seen with her and her husband, Gambit. Number 7. Dupe. Dupe is one of the X-Men who is known for being pretty ridiculous, and as such, a lot of people don't take Dupe seriously, which also extended to Dupe's power levels. However, I would argue that Dupe is actually one of the most powerful X-Men ever, who is simply grossly underrated due to his nonsensical appearance and his nonsensical depiction in the comics. Dupe has powers that allow him to influence the emotions of others, perform magic, resurrect, travel in the liminal space between comic book panels, shatter the fourth wall as he pleases, and so much more. Aside from strange abilities like being able to access an infinite storage dimension through his own body, he also is just extremely tough and physically strong as well. Dupe is also one of those characters who, when he needs to get things done, he kinda just can. There's a level of irrefutable plot armor with Dupe in a weird way. Number 6. Multiple Man. Multiple Man is such an amazingly powerful character. He is Jamie Madrox, and his mutant power is that he can create duplicates, nicknamed dupes, of himself to an almost unlimited extent. Initially in the comics, he tapped out at creating 40 dupes at a time, but now we've seen him create a whole laboratory staffing of dupes and more. His duplicates can go out in the world and live, and when he absorbs them back, ideally before they die, he absorbs everything they have known and learned, all their memories, experiences, skills, and knowledge. Of course, he does have to do that before they die. But because of this, Jamie is extremely skilled and is also a PhD multiple times over at this point. He's also done like an insane amount of jobs. He's like Barbie. He's done all the jobs that have ever existed pretty much at this point.
Number 5. Zorn. Question: what would you do if you and your twin brother developed the mutant ability of having your head become a star? Answer: I honestly don't know how you would still be alive to decide what to do in the first place. Shen Zorn and his twin brother Quan Yin Zorn both developed mutant powers that, in essence, were tiny stars that burned away and replaced their actual heads. They were both isolated, and they both wear super cool looking iron helmets with power dampeners to contain their power from doing too much damage. Shen is called Zorn with a Z, and his head is actually technically a black hole. And to keep things not confusing, Quan Yin is also named Zorn, but with an X. Okay, so what the heck can they do with their powers? Well, both of these characters can produce gravitational electromagnetism, which could actually allow them to heal others and use telepathy, and also, really weirdly, somehow allowed them to sense when people died and speak using shaking gravitational particles. Zorn, the one with a Z, could suck people into his black hole and even turn his black hole back into a sun. They could also both obviously do a lot of damage, using the power of a star to burn, blind, and incinerate people. They both became members of the X-Men at different times. X-Zorn was the first in 2002, but he wasn't always good. And his brother, Z-Zorn, joined more than a few years later.
Number 4. Sync. Sync is definitely having a big glow up moment right now in the comics, especially in regards to his power levels. And also, he literally glows. He glows rainbows. It's pretty cute. But also, in regards to some valuable character development, he's also seeing a huge glow up as well. Sync is Everett Thomas, a relatively newer character that was created back in 1994, making his first appearance in the 90s X-Men comic series in issue number 36. He tragically died during his time at Emma Frost's mutant school program at the Massachusetts Academy, sacrificing himself in order to help save other students during an attack on the school. However, Sync was recently brought back, resurrected, to be part of a team to venture into the vault vault to learn more about the Children of Tomorrow, joined by mutants Laura Kinney, aka Wolverine, and Armando Munoz, aka Darwin. He recently joined the main X-Men team as well, and after his time in the vault, being the only one to escape with his knowledge of what happened within intact, he also seems to have leveled up his powers, being able to remain synced with other mutants even when not in their vicinity. So if you've heard other people talking him up lately, that's why. And you should probably read along and join them in that hype train. Toot toot. Number 3, Jean Grey. You know, this list is a doozy because usually someone like Jean Grey takes my top spot when it comes to most powerful folks around lists. She's definitely one of the most powerful telepaths out there, and especially if we're talking X-Men members, Jean is also an original X-Men member too. So what's even more wild is that rather than become, a relic of the past who is bested by the younger, shinier mutant creations in comics, kind of like what's happened to Angel, I feel like, Jean has rather become a staple when it comes to the powerhouses of the X-Men, and she's returned to the X-Men multiple times as well. Jean initially joined the school and team back in X-Men issue number 1, all the way back at the beginning of X-Men history. Number 2, Iceman. Bobby Drake is deserving of so much respect and praise when it comes to X-Men, and he's come a long way in terms of his character and power evolution throughout the years as a team member. Robert Drake is actually one of the original X-Men team members, becoming notorious for being the kid of the team, the youngest member on that original roster, who is also prone to pull pranks and get into all kinds of antics. In terms of his power set, Bobby has gone from being kind of a snowman in little black booties who loved eating ice cream and throwing snowballs and making ice walls, to an elemental mutant who can control not just snow, but ice and water. He can make ice golems, which appear to even be somewhat sentient and living beings. He can shapeshift to become massive, travel in and through water as water himself, and has even been shown to be powerful enough, Omega level mutant that he is, to freeze hell over. Or at least, a version of hell. Number 1, Ascani / Rachel Summers. Rachel Summers is definitely one of the most powerful mutants and X-Men members out there. Of course, she might not be the most powerful. After all, I did create a list of powerful X-Men members prior to this, so if you're thirsting for more powerful members of the X-Men after this video, you should definitely check out our part 1 as well to find out who took my real tippity top spot. But still, Rachel is deserving of a top spot for sure. She is the alternate reality daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey, who are known to make powerful children together across the multiverse. Hence also why Sinister is so obsessed with the two of them getting together. Rachel is one of the chosen hosts of the Phoenix Force, and even without the Phoenix is extremely powerful, being an immensely powerful telepath, telekinetic, and chronokinetic. She can read time, skip through it, travel to alternate timelines and dimensions, and even manipulate time. She also happens to be immune to timeline alterations as well, and is unique in that she is the only version of herself throughout the multiverse. Even another Rachel Summers, should she meet one, would not be an alternate of her. She has no other versions of herself, which makes her uniquely well suited to time travel. Because, then she's not gonna, mess stuff up.
Starting off at number 10, we have Forget-Me-Not. I wanted to start this list off really small, with a character y'all may not know. Mainly because almost no one knows him because that's his power. Appearing in 2014, Forget-Me-Not had actually been a member of the X-Men for several years before this, but thanks to his abilities, no one can remember him. Forget-Me-Not's abilities make it so that he is imperceptible in all forms, basically. The power is so good that even Charles Xavier himself had to place a psychic reminder on himself so that he would remember Forget-Me-Not's existence. Clearly, that means some of the most powerful telepaths have difficulty discovering him, let alone remembering him. His power is to be forgotten, but the unique ways this power could be used, and the uniqueness of this power in general, will keep him in my mind. Number 9, we got I-Boy. Why is a guy named I-Boy on a list of strongest members of the X-Men? I see you, like many of the other mutants, are very judgmental. Trevor Hawkins' body is covered in eyes, 57 to be exact, which give him an array of powers that honestly, you kinda may expect. Microscopic, telescopic, X-ray, night, infrared, and thermal vision are all a part of his power list. But he can also detect chemicals, is an excellent marksman, and is skilled in nonverbal communication. He can almost read other people's minds by reading their behaviors and body language. He is an incredible tracker. He can predict attacks and can read people's histories just by looking at them. He can pinpoint weak spots in machines and people, is able to see electronic wavelengths and microwaves, is able to see past illusions and disguises as well as magic waves. He makes an amazing detective, in short. On top of all that, he can even pass what he sees onto others, but he has to be physically close enough for it to work. But to top it all off, the craziest and most unexpected power he possesses recently is solar blasts. We don't know how just yet, but Trevor can emit intense bursts of bright yellow energy and focused beams of extrastellar force that cause sunburns and radiation poisoning. Coming in at number 8, it's Gwenpool. I think Gwenpool has one of the strangest powers. That would be the power of medium interaction, which is because she comes from a reality very much like ours, as in superheroes are fictional people in comic books. So, when Gwen was transported to a pocket universe that recreated her home reality, Gwen's perception of the fictional world allowed her to gain the ability to recognize and manipulate the artistic medium that she was now in. She can see and physically interact with lettering and caption boxes, and touch and even break through panel gutters, allowing her to transport objects short distances through space and time by moving them across panels, and she interacts with different instances of herself from multiple panels on the same page. Now, I don't know if you've realized this, but this kind of means Gwendolyn Poole can kind of warp reality in a way. She kind of becomes one of the most crazily powerful characters in comics, at least potentially. She first showed up in Howard the Duck Volume 6 number 1 in November of 2015, and she has actually teamed up with many different characters and teams, including being a member of the X-Men on and off again.
Number 7, Genesis, or Evan Sabanur. Usually when we think of X-Men, we do not think of Apocalypse. Well, we maybe think of Apocalypse, but only in regards to him being one of the main villains of the team, not one of their most powerful and intimidating members and assets. However, Apocalypse isn't the only Apocalypse out there. Evan Sabanur is actually the clone of Apocalypse, who would take for himself the name of Genesis. And in fact, we later learn he isn't even the only Genesis either, with Apocalypse's wife also being known by that name, it turns out. Also, there's like another Genesis. There's a few Genesis. Genesis might not be as powerful yet as someone like Apocalypse, but it's possible that he actually has the potential to be even stronger than the original as time goes on. He also happens to be a bona fide hero, for the most part, minus when he had his alignment swapped in Axis. But other than that, he pretty much sticks to heroics and even ends up joining the X-Men.
Number 6. It's Sync. Everett Thomas isn't a new character by any means, being first introduced in 1994, but while he was a part of Generation X, he didn't officially land on the team until this newest iteration of X-Men. He was also one of the first mutants resurrected by the Five on Krakoa, due to the fact that his powers could enable him to act as a substitute for any of the Five who might need to tag out. With that said, what are his powers? Synch's powers are known as synchronistic power replication. Synch basically produces this really cool funkadelic looking aura that allows him to synchronize with other supers in his vicinity, letting him use their powers unless they leave the vicinity. But what's really interesting is that he doesn't need that person to be completely there. So if you had like a tissue sample from a superpowered person, he could sync with that and it would be enough. Since his resurrection, his powers have been amped up, giving him a limited memory bank of powers he's synced with. He became an official base member of the new X-Men team announced at the Hellfire Gala alongside Laura Kinney in X-Men Volume 5 number 21 in 2022.
Number 5, Vulcan. This is going to be a list that is just filled with Omega level mutants, isn't it? And Vulcan, of course, is no exception. While the youngest of Summers brothers, he is also often thought of as being the most powerful of them all as well. Vulcan is Gabriel Summers, the little brother that for most of their lives neither Scott nor Alex really knew existed. Vulcan joined the X-Men back when Professor X was putting together a rescue team to go into the, at the time, villainous mutant island of Krakoa and save his original X-Men team. Vulcan was part of the team that first attempted this, taking the name originally of Kid Vulcan for himself during his time training with Moira McTaggart's mutant team. While Vulcan's mission with this newly formed X-Men group wouldn't exactly go to plan, he would still remain a former X-Men member who years later would return to get revenge on the X-Men team he had attempted to save, who he blamed for launching him and fellow X-mate Darwin into outer space.
Number 4, it's Dupe. First appearing in X-Force number 116 in 2001, Dupe Dupe's origin story is kind of hard to explain, because we don't know for a fact what it is. Captain America tells us he was a US Cold War weapons project, and he apparently had some kind of role in the fall of communism. He was originally a member of X-Force until eventually becoming a member of X-Static. For such an unthreatening character, Dupe is surprisingly strong. He has been described as being an extra-dimensional being with a genius-level intellect, bordering on possible omniscience. And he has a large array of psionic powers, one of which includes controlling Russians. He can change his size and shape at will, allowing him to heal wounds and reassemble parts of his body if they have been removed or cut off. He has an incredible level of super strength and durability as well, with an unknown limit, being able to match and overcome Thor in a fight when he was in a weakened state, taking hits from Mjolnir while he did so. He seems to be able to come back from the afterlife, and he also has a pocket dimension inside himself that he can store things in and summon creatures from. He can also completely break the fourth wall and go across the comic panels. Dupe has defeated the devil all by himself. He is overpowered, and I don't know how anyone loses with him on their team.
Number 3, Spider-Man. Did you know that Spider-Man was an X-Men? Yeah, he was. Even though he's not really a mutant, but a mutate. But hey, don't let that limit you. You can still be an X-Men, even if you're not a mutant. There's still hope for me. Kinda makes me feel bad for Deadpool though, who always wants to join in on the mutant fun and games and camaraderie, but is so often shafted by them because, well, he's Wade and he's kinda annoying. But of course, us readers all love him anyway. In fact, I think I love him more because he's annoying, but I digress. This is Peter's point, not Wade's point. Spider-Man ended up joining the X-Men in the wake of Wolverine's death, as Storm had found papers regarding to an idea to have Spider-Man join the team and teach his own special class of mutants. As such, he joins the X-Men in Spider-Man and the X-Men issue number 1.
Number 2, Elixir. Joshua Foley, otherwise known as Elixir, is a mutant with Omega-level healing abilities. He's incredibly powerful, and while originally was just considered a general threat, he can actually use his powers offensively as well, completely ending lives if he wants to. Using his mutant ability of biokinesis, Elixir is capable of controlling the biological structure of his own and other people's bodies down to the genetic level. Now this started off small, but has grown to allow him to simultaneously heal dozens of people, resurrect himself and others, and even the ability to control, manipulate, and absorb the life forces of other living creatures. Offensively, he can use his death touch to harm others, to cause different types of illness, massive swellings, and organ failure. He's even completely destroyed the body of enemies before. He is one of the core members of the Five, as I'm sure no one is surprised about, and he has been a member of the X-Men ever since he was one of the only surviving mutants who retained his powers at the Xavier Institute after M-Day, and he was trained to become one in 2006's New Mutants. Number 1. Hope Summers. Hope Summers was the first mutant born after the events of M-Day, the mutant decimation, or the day that Scarlet Witch cast No More Mutants. She was then taken into the far future and raised by Cable, being carried around in the coolest baby Bjorn you'll ever see. Not too long after, she returned to the present and her mutant powers finally activated. Her power is basically that of Omega-level power manipulation. She can manipulate the powers of other mutants nearby to her, even mimicking their powers, but at full capacity and with complete control over those powers. And she can even take on multiple powers at once, but it is pretty tiring for her to do that. A large part of her role in the Krakoan society is as the leader of the Five, who use their abilities to resurrect the mutants of Krakoa. Her role on the Five specifically is both to boost their powers to their full potential and help them work in synergy with each other perfectly. She also helped terraform Mars alongside Vulcan and Proteus, giving them enough power to actually do it. She is such a cool character, and she first appeared back in X-Men Volume 2 number 205 in 2008, but was a child for much of that until she came of age and joined X-Force and the X-Men.